Richard, good morning. Hello. What I was thinking about how to fill these 5 minutes and what not to put in. And I've decided to talk about the value of embedding CQ, not EQ or IQ, but CQ, cultural intelligence or cultural competence in your organization, not just as a nice to have or another box that you can tick off on your D&I list, but actually is something that makes business sense, that can add value to your organization. Why? Why bother? Well, especially as Lee said, in professional services, so much of your business is about human interaction, is about creating relationships with each other as colleagues, but also with your clients. And that's where culture plays a huge role. Now, of course, not everything is culture. Sometimes the dynamic going on between you and your team or you and your client is somebody having a bad day or not liking you. But very often there's a cultural dynamic in international business that is heightened at moments of stress, pressure, conflict, and is also heightened in this virtual environment that all of us are working in now and will continue to work in for a long time. Just as an example, there was a lovely case last year, just after the first lockdown, of a Japanese company that put in a request to Zoom, asking them if they would please introduce a new functionality whereby they could order all the photos, all the video, all the thumbnails on the screen, and give some people bigger thumbnails than others in order to be able to recreate the physical office environment. Now, why did that matter? Well, from a Japanese perspective, so that people knew how to interact with each other. Who's who? Who's more senior? Who's more junior? When can I speak? Who's going to ask questions when? To be able to predict the environment. Now, that's just one example, but where does culture and how does culture play a role in the organization as a whole, as individual level, team level, and at leadership level? Well, it starts, for example, with recruitment. Our recruitment processes and how we judge each other's behavior during recruitment. Also, recruitment criteria. What does a competent professional look like? What does having drive, being ambitious, being a team player look like in terms of behavior? Drop the concept of ambition or drive into 5 different cultural contexts, and you're likely to find 5 different translations of how we interpret it. I was working recently with an Indian man, highly educated, PhD in his 20s, very keen, very ambitious, and he had applied for his dream role with an American company and he hadn't got it. And we encouraged him to get some feedback as to why he hadn't made it. And the feedback that he got was, we didn't think you were very interested. And he was shocked and horrified. And when we had a look at why, part of the feedback that he had got was, well, you didn't ask us any questions. You only answered our questions. And the Indian candidate sort of went, well, of course, I'm the candidate. I was there for interview. Why would I ask questions during an interview? And that had been interpreted as lack of interest, lack of commitment to the role. So it also runs through culture, things like your organizational values. I looked up the organizational values of a couple of my professional services clients. And then you see things like, we treat people with respect, we have integrity, we collaborate, we care. Again, all these terms have a cultural sensitivity, which doesn't matter. There is no one size fits all in culture. There's no culturally neutral way of doing things. But it does make sense to be aware and to understand how these terms roll out, what they mean to the different cultural groups that you have in your organization or your client groups as well. It runs into things like, what are your subconscious assumptions of a good colleague? What makes you a good colleague? What makes you a good leader? What makes you a good client Yeah, client relations, very culturally sensitive. I'm based in the Netherlands. A Dutch client of mine was horrified when their own Malaysian client moved into their headquarters for the duration of the project that they had been assigned. They sent over a group of 5 people and were there for 9 months for the duration of the project, which the Dutch took as being a sign of distrust, or they're monitoring us, they're micromanaging. But from a Malaysian perspective, was just the Malaysians being a good client, being on hand to give information, to answer questions, and to monitor, and to find out how things were doing. So both parties were just trying to fulfill their role as competent professionals, but from this very different cultural perspective. There's been a lot of research on multicultural teams and what is the added value of working in a multicultural team. Nancy Adler of McGill University has done some very good research on this. And it shows that multicultural teams can go one of 2 ways. They can either outperform or underperform monocultural teams. And 2 of the determining factors are the leadership. In teams, in organizations where leaders, A, acknowledge and recognize that culture plays a role in the organizational dynamic, and B, see that as being a good thing, something that can be leveraged, can add value to the organization. These are the organizations, the teams that do take advantage of the intercultural component. And of course, the opposite is true. Leaders who either don't see or don't recognize culture as playing a role, or they see it as a problem to be got around, those are the teams and the organizations for whom it does tend to become more of an obstacle than of added value. I shall never forget working with a big law firm in London with a group of lawyers who were on a big, working on a big client account with their French counterparts. And in frustration, one of the English lawyers said to me, "Why can't you just tell the French to do things properly?" And I said, "But the French are doing things properly, but it's a different properly. It's a different normal." Yeah. Why bother? Why bother to know about this, to embed it in your organization? Mobility, employee retention, succession planning, leadership development in our increasingly international business context really require cultural competence, awareness and sensitivity in order to be able to function effectively, comfortably, appropriately. And finally, your organizational culture is also worth looking at. Is it conducive to allowing people from all different cultural backgrounds to function effectively and to be heard and to be recognized? What sort of person makes it in your organization? What sort of characteristics, behavioral traits tend to be promoted within your organization? It may well be that your criteria, your processes, your systems are disregarding many other approaches from people from different cultural backgrounds that are equally as valuable. So it's in our behavior, in our processes, and also in our mindset as a whole. I'm going to stop because Richard is waving at me, but that's just some of the points that I wanted to touch on this morning. Thank you.